Hey guys, it's Matthew here once again, and today I want to give you a full rundown and demo of how the Mortem Morsu Starter Assassin Spectral Throw goes in the endgame, and how it is to start out on a league with. So it is the character that I listed as one of the potential starters for the Legacy League. It was just a mock-up at the time of an assassin-based spectral throw with the two Mortem Morsu claws, which are really easy to get and just sort of like beginner weapons. So in total, the build itself came together pretty much as I expected it to, and yeah, it was fairly cheap and very much a starter build, something you can do off of very little currency and get going right from the get-go of the game. So I'll go over just some of the gameplay and the end game encounters that I've already done with this build, since I've done pretty much everything at this stage. Just bum rushed straight to it since it's been very straightforward, and I'm more or less just testing the build for you guys so I have more sort of concrete ideas and guidelines for you to follow when actually mentioning this build in the future, since when I called it a starter build I didn't really have any idea what I'd be doing with it except for general links and all that. So that's the gameplay of the build. This is some of the boss kills that we've been doing. Now these are all on a 5 link with a level 19 gem and really sort of cheap gear at this stage. I'll go over all of the gear and the whole setup in the end, but I just want to give you an idea of how what it looks like without, really investing almost anything. This is an Ulnatol breach that gets completely steamrolled. Most bosses get completely destroyed except for the Hydra and the Chimera because they're poison immune, of course, but even those bosses shouldn't take too long to die once you get fully ramped on the build and have like a 6 link and a level 20 gem, maybe even a level 21 gem, but this is more or less the most basic setup. Here's the Uberit Siri run, the first one I did, which ended up being pretty damn good. The DPS was good across the board. Now at this stage I'll also mention that it's just a simple spectral throw build with some poison and assassin. It's pretty generic and there's nothing really to copy, so people have been saying this is someone else's build. It really isn't. I've mentioned like a long time ago you can use Mortem Morsus as a sort of weapon to level with and even potentially scale into endgame as an assassin long ago when I made Dreamfeather, and this is what it is. It is basically just, Mortem Morsu, assassin, pretty generic shit with lots of poison and all that. I haven't seen anyone else's builds about it, so, it's not taken from anywhere. If someone else has done this before, good on them. But it's not particularly revolutionary, and this is just me trying to give you guys a good starter option as a Spectral Throw character when you're going to start a league out, or perhaps the next expansion even, unless we get some serious double dipping changes, which we very well potentially may. So this could be the last version of the starter build you see, but for now, if you want to get into some Spectral Throw action without too much of a budget, without investing too much currency, and for the most part get everything done, then this is one you can go with. It starts out with really cheaply, really easily, and scales amazingly all the way through just because of the added Chaos Gem, the Claws, and the Assassin Ascendancy, and then the more you put into it, the more currency you invest, the more time you invest, it will get stronger and stronger and become an absolute game beater. Now, as I mentioned, Hydra over here, it's a pretty bad fight in the end. It takes something like 3 to 5 minutes to kill in my current setup. This was a really bad one though, in particular because it had reduced crit damage, it had monster life, it had hexproof. All in all, Hydra should be a pretty easy fight, especially once you get into the endgame setup of the build. Chimera, even with this setup, really wasn't that bad. You just drop a trap on top of him throughout one of the phases, you pop all your flasks, and you should get him down in about 1 to 2 rotations of flasks, and the ads die pretty damn quickly, pretty damn easily. All in all, it's just kind of a slower kill, because obviously he cannot be affected by poison, so it's a bit less than ideal, but it's still very much doable. That said, these types of builds are not meant for smashing Hydra and Chimera. You should already know that, and it's just still nice that you can end up doing it anyway. Shaper over here, As long as you get your Wither Totem down, some good Wither Totem placement, he dies immensely fast. And it's really good DPS considering this is still on a 5-link with level 19 gem and a few other gear upgrades that can be made. So all in all, he could die something like 50% faster in the endgame setup. But right now, this was a completely deathless run and it was still really fast and really good for the price that you pay for everything on this build. Even with the quote-unquote Mathel effect, the stuff that's needed for this build still is pretty damn cheap. You don't need to go out of your way to buy it super expensive, and it'll still work all the way through to, yeah, things like Shaper and Uber Itziri, though with the 5k life, since this isn't strictly a CI huge face tanking sort of build, you will probably need to learn some of these encounters, how to play them, and how to best adjust to their, well, dangers. And that's one of the beauties for me of Spectral Throw and the Whirling Blades playstyle. It's really enjoyable because it is somewhat skill based. You don't just straight up face tank everything, and you don't just press one button. You do a lot of movement, you do a lot of dancing around and learning mechanics of fights, and then in the end you become a better player for it. At least I hope or think so. And there goes the Shaper. So that was more or less all the encounters you're going to be facing in the game. It's pretty damn fast for clear speed. At least I think it's better than Dreamfeather because we're crit based. We have larger initial hits, and it just ends up clearing faster for maps, and you don't need a Vinctars. All you really at most need is a Witchfire, and even then you don't have to do that. You can run 2 Blasphemies instead. So yeah, there's no real strict requirements on flasks there. It's pretty cheap. No real strict requirements on gear except for a couple of Mortem Morsus. You don't even need them to have good rolls. The Fizz roll almost does nothing. The difference between a perfect one and a bad one is like 5 to 10 Fizz damage on the claw itself, and the conversion goes from anywhere like 10 to 20%. Try and get a higher conversion because it does become a little bit better, but ultimately if you have a shit one without good conversion, it doesn't matter at all. You'll still have really good damage on the build. But the reason we're using these is because they have really good attack speed, really good crit, a bunch of crit multi, the poison on hit, or poisonous hit, so you don't actually have to get poison anywhere else in the build, and it becomes pretty damn reliable, and of course a bit of the conversion for chaos. So at the current stage we're dealing almost entirely chaos damage, but a little bit of fizz as well, which still poisons, and we then don't have to use poison anywhere in our setup. So the endgame setup here, I'll go over it right now, is currently the main things are Spectral Throw, there it is, Spectral Throw into added chaos damage, into GMP, and then Void Manipulation, and then you open up room for a Faster Attacks as your 5th link, and then a Pierce Gem as your 6th link. Now, we already pierce, yes, that's true, but it does end up having 20% more projectile damage, which double dips, which is, in the end, the best 6th link you can get, better than anything else you can think of. So yeah, go ahead and do that as a 6th link if you can get one. And it's a pretty big upgrade to get. And then, of course, we sub in slower projectiles for the single target when you want to go into single target mode, and just GMP when you're going everything else. The character throughout most of the videos you just then saw is about level 87 to 89, and it's on a 5 link, it's a level 19 gem. Getting a level 20 or a 21 is huge damage gains because this is where almost all of our damage comes from. So there's quite a big difference between what I'm currently running and a fully endgame setup. The Spectral Throw itself at the moment has 48 crit, with the 4 power charges we get from the Assassin, and the Assassin Ascendancy comes entirely from here, and then Deadly Infusion buffs those. We end up at about 82% crit, and then Diamond Flask tops us up for the rest of that crit. When you're leveling the character, the first 4 points you want are Noxious Strike and then Toxic Delivery, then you go to Unstable Infusion and Deadly Infusion. It's not that important that you get it as soon as possible, you still get lots of crit, even just from power charges without this and a Diamond Flask, and it still feels perfectly fine. The passive tree itself, Pretty straightforward. I went over it yesterday in the previous video about the spectral throw leveling. Essentially, you're just trying to fill out as much of your damage as possible, as soon as possible. You get the good life nodes, you get the good crit nodes, you dual wield your Mortem Morsus. It's pretty straightforward. It basically fills itself out. You can't really go wrong, and just refer to the leveling guide for how you level the character. Now in the end, we only have about 5k life. We are dual wielding the Mortem Morsus, and I think that is the best course of action for our damage, because you get quite a lot of extra crit multi, bit of extra conversion, a lot of extra attack speed. In the end, it is just, I think, the best option, and should be better than the hits cannot be evaded shield like Hoside. That's my opinion anyway. I'm pretty sure it's worth doing this, especially when you factor in things like Twin Terrors as well. But by all means, if you want to wear a shield, especially if you're going to a more hardcore sort of version of this build, then you probably want to wear a shield and aim for something like 5,500, maybe even 6k life. But at the moment, I've tried to get life just about everywhere. Cherubim's Maleficence is too good to not use for this build. We get a lot of chaos out of it. The leech per second is really nice. So, you know, if you're afraid of not having enough life, you can go a Belly the Beast and you gain about 500 life, but I feel this is too good to not use at the moment, so we're going with that. We're running a Dodra's Damning for a second curse, so we run Blasphemy and Proj Weakness to start with, and then our second curse is Witchfire, which is up most of the time, since this is up most of the time, but you can of course run both Blasphemies if you really want, and free up a flask slot there. Our second piece of reservation at the moment is just Arctic Armor, puts a nifty little rain cloud over our head, and reduces some damage taken and some fire damage taken. Besides that, the gear is really straightforward. Life resists attack speed, life resists bit of accuracy, life resists reduced flask charges used, life resists a little bit of fizz damage, but it does go a long way to get additional chaos damage to your attacks on your jewelry, which I managed to do on my amulet. So life, crit multi, fizz damage, and a free prefix is what you're ideally looking for in your jewelry, but that's about as good as it can get. This one can get better. The Whirling Blades setup for your travel ends up being Whirling Blades, faster attacks, blood magic, and fortify. The Wither Totem setup is Wither, faster casting, spell totem, increased duration. The Val setup you're going to be using is Val Lightning Trap, Val Haste, and increased duration. And then your bits and pieces are Ice Golem, Blood Rage, and Arctic Armor. In the end, we have 90% chance to hit when Ice Golem is up. That is just from one piece of accuracy gear. So you get lots of accuracy just because you're dexterity based, and there's a lot of accuracy nodes you pick up along the way. So in the end, accuracy is pretty easy to come by, and that's why I don't think it's worth using the hits cannot be evaded shield, and rather dual wield. Bandits, of course, are on the screen right now, but all in all, I think that's about everything I have to say about this character. It's been a very strong spectral throw character, and something I could easily see myself leveling past this stage. We'll see how we go. I'll maybe play it again for at least another day and experience some more Guardian, some Uber Eats series, and some endgame maps. It's been very smooth, very good. The question is it better than Dream Feather? I think ultimately this should scale damage better than Dream Feather, and probably be a cheaper build to start, just because it seems to require less specific gear overall. But in the end, I think they're very comparable. Dream Feather is just going to be a more defensive setup, whereas this one's going to be a more offensive setup. So you pick whichever one you want, I reckon, for Spectral Throw, and have at it. So that's it for this one, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.